one require, the only way I can do it is each one too. But Facebook is the only one.
Alright, I guess I'll start. We should really only go an hour because I have to go to Seattle tonight. So, hello, Facebook, YouTube, YouNow, and Sherry Jones, Sandy Hershelman, and we have 2 viewers on Facebook already.
All right.
Facebook really picks up the viewers. So, welcome to the 5th? I think it's the 5th episode of The Mindful Activist. My name is Matt Reddy. Oh, that one dropped out. My name is Matt Reddy, and I am the host of this podcast. I am an activist. What do I say? I'm the founder of the Global Consensus Project, the developer of the Hive1.net software, and I'm also an elected politician, a hospital commissioner here in Jefferson County, Washington. And this is my podcast. And joining me today is Alex Bryan.
Hi, Matt.
Hi. And I'm really excited about having Alex here today. Very interesting fella, and we've had some interesting, we've worked together in interesting ways and interesting projects, which we'll get into. And for those of you watching on Facebook, we're not going to pay a lot of attention to the comments as we're talking, but we will check in with them periodically. Let's see. And the other thing that I often do, which is like, is I start a live video conference that anyone could join.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'm going to do that right now before we keep talking, and then I'm going to try to stop paying attention to the technology all around me.
I'm impressed with your handle on it all.
So we're using the Zoom software for this video conference, and technically any number of people could join, up to actually 50 people could join using this free account with them. And I'm just going to go on Facebook and post the link, and we'll call it good. No one will probably join the conference, although we've had a couple drop-ins before. And my friend Kim did join for a few minutes once. But eventually, and when they conference, we'll be able to show them right here. So we'd have
I see.
A bunch of people right there behind us. There we are. See, we're live on Facebook.
Right.
And pasting the link. Okay. Posted the link on Facebook. So now we'll begin an interview. So welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, except I just bumped my head on the way over here on a tree, cutting through the woods to get to the bus stop. So yeah, but I'm okay.
Has it altered your state of consciousness?
Unfortunately, no.
No? Okay.
No, I'm fine. Okay. Yeah, looking forward to talking.
So why don't we begin with my one question that I ask everyone, which is, do you consider yourself an activist?
Yeah, that's right. I remember that question from watching your podcast last week. Yeah, and I thought about that. Well, I guess I would say yes and no, in the sense that yes, I definitely prefer action over philosophy and intention, and I'm taking action on various fronts. But it raises the issue of is there such a thing as an activist or a professional or a teacher, or these labels that we use to describe ourselves or other people. Trump is a fascist. We could go on and on, but the labeling is actually is very much at a big part of the work that I do, is looking at labeling and what I would call evaluations, other forms of evaluation, as being very much at the root of conflict and violence. So that's the part where I would say no.
So labeling itself you're saying is at the root of conflict and violence, or just a contributor potentially to?
Well, we're going to break right into this here, I guess.
Right. Well, without actually. Well, we're not giving. That's interesting because we're not giving people any context for who you are.
Right.
We just jumped right into.
Yeah. Would you like me to introduce myself?
Why don't we? All right. We'll stop.
Or
We're going to pick up back on labels because you're right. This is a rich topic.
Yeah.
I've thought about it a lot. So why don't we do that? Give a little bit of context. Who the heck are you? How would you like to introduce yourself to our vast audience?
Yeah, thanks. Well, my name is Alex Bryan, and I've lived here since 2001. And about 10 years ago, I started a business that morphed into a nonprofit called Third Ear Project. Third Ear, as in listening. And that was based on work that I was doing with what I called at the time compassionate communication or intentional communication. All of it's rooted in Marshall Rosenberg's work of nonviolent communication. But in the process of doing this, I came to realize that really this is not about communication per se. It's much more about an awareness and a practice. So I've been working on sort of reformulating it out of the communication context and more into the context of preventing conflict and violence, which is another way of saying making peace.
So what type of situations would this project get involved? Are we talking corporations, government, communities? What type of situation?
Yeah, really all the above and more. Let's see, government. I don't know if I've worked with government yet, but I've worked in schools and families and businesses, and I've worked in prisons and church groups, and just anywhere where there are people dealing with. Well, I wasn't going to say with each other, but dealing with themselves even, how we relate to ourselves and each other. So it's anywhere that people are navigating reality, navigating life, going through relationships, going through decision-making processes. All those places where we encounter differences with each other that need to be navigated or figured out in some way. A lot of people talk about conflict and they'll say conflict is inevitable. It's human nature. It's inevitable, and I much of this work is about being very clear about definitions of words and using them very consistently, because I think that's part of the problem is the very loose use that we have with these concepts. I think there needs to be more of a science of peace, a science of conflict and violence prevention. Let's see, where was I?
Well, I mean, you're like triggering like several branches of questioning.
Yeah. So just to finish my introduction, I stopped doing Third Ear Project here in Port Townsend about 4 years ago, and I've been traveling a good bit and working on a book and a website, and that's what I've got going now is my new website that I'm putting up, my training on videos and stuff like that. So I'm trying to expand my reach. Okay. On the internet. So that's.
And what's your website address? Do you have that yet?
I do, but it's not quite. It's not quite ready for prime time.
But if you say it out loud on this podcast, you're gonna feel so motivated when you go home today to get it at least like the front page ready to go. Yeah. It'll motivate you. Trust me, I've done this to myself.
I will do that on next week's podcast.
Okay, all right.
It is live. You could go there, but I just want to hold off a little bit longer till it's ready for prime time.
I know what you mean. But I've been basically using that technique to force myself to get this podcast going, get my website going, just tell someone about it. Anyways.
I've thought about that with my book because I see that people do Kickstarter campaigns and stuff in order to write their book, and they get the funding before they've written the book. And I've been writing a book for the last few years, and so it's that would be immense pressure to have expectation and pay up front. But anyway, so there we go.
All right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about, but I think it might help anyone watching this to have to tell them a little bit of a story, a narrative that they can follow. So why don't we tell a little bit of our narrative of how we ended up knowing each other, if that's all right with you?
Oh yeah, sure.
So, would you like to? Why don't you just tell from your perspective?
I mean, my memory is that we met at Occupy gatherings.
Do you remember what events we started working together?
Not really. It's been a few years, and I remember. I think I remember a meeting in the Undertown that you were there.
Yeah.
A few meetings there, and then the gathering in Portland. There was an Occupy Northwest or some larger, trying to stitch together a larger thing, I think, down in Portland that we went to.
There was the Occupy Olympia.
Maybe it was, no, was it Olympia? Olympia.
Yeah,
You're right, not Portland.
Solid Social Forum, Occupy Olympia Social Forum.
Yeah.
So, well, I remember it a little bit more detailed than that, so I'll tell my story. So and I told this story because I interviewed yesterday or the day before another person that helped start Occupy Port Townsend, Barbara Morey. But it was a group decided to try to start an Occupy Port Townsend General Assembly, and scheduled a meeting in the Undertown, which existed at that time, and either the first or second meeting you were there, and you immediately shared that you had facilitation skills and expertise, and immediately started like helping those of us that were really trying to figure out how are we going to facilitate.
I do remember now sitting at the end of a very long table.
Yeah, and it ended up, I think after that first meeting, you and I ended up exchanging phone numbers, and we ended up on the phone a lot talking about like what do we do, because we had like a series of planning meetings.
Yes.
And we basically, we really co-created the process that we were going to use for that first Occupy Port Townsend General Assembly. Yep. And then we co-facilitated that General Assembly.
Where was that?
That was at the UU,
right?
At the Unitarian Fellowship,
right, of course.
And actually, the whole thing is on video.
Oh, right on.
And so you can actually, those of you that are really interested, you can see Alex and me facilitate the first Occupy Port Townsend General Assembly.
Archived, cool.
Yeah. And so that was an interesting experience. That was, for me, that was like, I really started to learn how, learn the difference between facilitation and facilitation with an eye for really being egalitarian.
Mm-hmm.
Really facilitation with the lowest amount of power differential that you can possibly have, and still have really effective group process.
Yeah, I like that image, that phrase. Yeah. Lowest power differential.
Yeah. And is that now? Did you come into that? You came. What were your skills coming into that? What was the background? Because for me, it was workshop facilitation from the hospital where I worked. Mm-hmm. What was your? Where'd you come from?
Yeah, at the time, I was busy studying and learning and teaching dynamic governance, also known as sociocracy.
Okay.
And so I was working with the Fort Worden Partners group at that time, mm-hmm. and other groups, Goddard College and some other groups, helping them to implement consent decision-making processes, and those more egalitarian meeting facilitation processes. And so that's what I was doing, and when I saw Occupy happening, I was like, oh wow, that looks like there's probably a need there for some help with group decision making and that kind of thing. So
and then you took off. You the Occupy Port Townsend sort of carried on for about a year, and then I remember you telling me you went and visited other Occupy groups. Did you do that?
Yeah, I went to Portland because I had a friend down there that was very involved with Portland Occupy.
Okay.
And I went down there, and also to Seattle, although they seemed less interested in any sort of, same with Portland, both places were generally seemed uninterested in a formal pre-packaged system for for decision making or whatever.
So you went there. You wanted to share some of your ideas. You were hoping.
I was curious what was going on. I wanted to participate. I totally loved the movement, and so I was going anyway. But I was sort of exploring to see if there was something I could offer or a way to support what was happening with what I knew.
And so How did that stop? Like what happened?
Let's see how that stop. I went to some of those, and then not long let's see. I actually wanted to go to Zuccotti Park, and then things got shut down by the time I could mobilize away from the West Coast.
Yeah.
That was winding down, and then I went to the East Coast anyway, and ended up in Florida. And do you remember what year that was? Was that 4 years ago?
Uh,
I think it might have been 5
maybe
years.
more
ago.
than that. Yeah, 5
Yeah,
years.
yeah. It's interesting. I'm trying to remember what I did that winter.
Okay, I mean,
I was
that gives
traveling
us-
on the East Coast.
Yeah, and then eventually you came back, and now you are, and so now you're sort of focused on helping people with conflict, with healthy process.
Yeah, I am working with some people. I do some coaching, and I've done some classes on the phone. Mostly I've been focused on trying to sort of organize all the information that I'm trying to put out there and figure out the best platform for doing that. So mostly, yeah, working on how to scale it up and make it available to a lot more people. Because the basics of it, I was thinking about my classes, and I realized when I thought about it, most people on a class spend most of the time during class listening. So of course on a live class you always have the option in real time to raise your hand or ask questions or bring up your own stuff and work with that. But most of the learning happens just from listening to people bring their stuff up and people work through it and me facilitate that and other people in the group work with them. So there's a lot of learning that can be done just by listening, and I started realizing then that means that if I record, or do videos of just me explaining a lot of this stuff, that's a way to get it out there a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
So it still requires real-time practice and coaching and question and answer, but you can get a lot just from static.
So, do you consider yourself a group facilitator? Is that one of your...
I love facilitating groups. Yes.
Oh, but it's back to the label thing.
Yeah.
So
it's changing it into am I a thing to what do I do? It's changing from a noun to a verb. So instead of what am I, it's what do I do? And I definitely love working with groups. That's challenging. I come very much. It's very invigorating.
Yeah. Well, I kind of see. My project is sort of figuring out how to facilitate in a healthy way bigger and bigger groups, scaling it up to thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people.
Right.
Is that
through Hive Mind, right?
Well, yeah, through the Hive1.net. That's
right.
The platform I designed for it. And is that the concept that you're interested in, facilitating mass groups of people in a different way for?
I'm interested in a abstract sort of way because I've never seen it done on that level, and I've definitely thought about it. I've thought, John Buck is the person who I learned Sociocracy from, and he wrote the main book on dynamic governance, and that was one of the first books published in English on the subject, and that's his goal. Actually, he thought Port Townsend might be his next step, scale up to having an entire community, an entire town, or he'd love to find it, a city or a town that would just go all in on organizing itself sociocratically. So that concept of ever larger organization and facilitation of groups that way is fascinating to me. But I'm really interested in your project and how that works, how that would work.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just sort of curious, like how big of a group do you feel like right now you would feel comfortable facilitating with whatever tools that are available?
Well, I guess the size of the group, so, the Occupy groups were pretty big, and their difficulty was that not everybody was on the same page, not everybody had the same understanding of what was going on, and there was so much resistance to any sort of group coordination or anybody standing up front calling the shots, that it was difficult to pull that together. But I think that if you have a group that is on the same page, that has gotten some training about the basis for consent decision making and the intention behind that and what they can expect from that and how to participate in that, I think you could work with I don't know how to say how big of a group. I know that dynamic sociocracy has been implemented in very large, I don't know about entire, Zappos. Zappos, I think, is running on Sociocracy. And I like what was it? I can't remember now. he lists a few companies on the back of his book. I think it was like the European wing of Shell Oil, or maybe it was the Dutch element or something like that, was running on dynamic governance, and a few others. I wish I could think of them right now. I want to say Mars Candy, for some reason. Anyway, so they've implemented on some pretty large scales, but I don't know how to.
Well, what? And forgive me, I'm just sort of following a train of thought.
Yeah.
Am I interrogating you as someone that knows about facilitation?
Yeah.
Let's assume they don't have any training. I mean, and they don't have. I mean, you're starting from square one with the group.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, though, they have to at least be saying, Alex, will you help facilitate us? So that would be step.
Or another way to say that would be they have to at the very least, like let's say they don't say, hey Alex, or would someone do this, but let's say I jump up and say, actually at that meeting was a good example. It's a small scale, but at that meeting, I'm pretty sure I didn't walk in there and say, I know how to run this meeting. I'm going to show you how to do this, right? Okay, so ready to hand out. It was more like I can do this. This is something I can do. And then I don't know if someone said, well, why don't you do that, or if I said, why don't I do that unless someone objects. So it's not so much you have to have people saying, I want you to do it. You have to not have people saying, no, we don't want that.
Yeah.
And so the objection part, as you know.
Yeah.
So go ahead. So if they wanted me to jump up, if I'm at least I'm in front, and there's a big group, and they're done, and they're not objecting.
Yeah. So let's say it's a group of 200 people, and it's a real mishmash of people, like mix of right, left wing, conservative, liberal, and they have to make a decision, or some decisions. 200 people, would you be comfortable saying, I can help facilitate this if there's no objection? Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. What if it was 1,000 people?
Well, as if the logistics were in place to hear, to do that, yeah.
Well, what logistics?
So. Just be able to hear people, for people to be able to see what's going on, for people to be able to somehow know that they have a way to have their voice heard in that process. If there's some sort of, I don't know if it's microphones or.
Yeah, I mean, you assume audio. Assume everyone can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see enough to know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, I might call you to help do that,
yeah, right
because
on.
that is the goal, to get 1,000 plus.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine we'd probably be on the phone a lot planning, what we were exactly how we would do it logistically.
Yeah. In terms of logistics and stuff, definitely preparation and planning. But what's exciting for me about working with groups is the spontaneity. You don't know what you're going to encounter, and then the challenge of dealing with that in real time. In fact, I actually consider that to be maybe the most cutting edge of this whole thing, is at the intersection of consent decision making and empathy for differences that emerge, or more likely conflict that emerges in some of that process. Even if it's not conflict, it could be someone who's just totally distressed about something, what someone just said, or whatever is being proposed, and when you get triggered like that, you can't. It's hard to reason. You don't have access to your thinking faculties the way you do when you're not triggered. So to try to reason with someone or talk to them in a normal, in our usual sort of way, who's super triggered, is usually not very effective. So having this other skill of empathy, which is, and actually I would call it empathy in action, not just the empathy that we think of, but this is the very, very specific practice that I teach, and I call it empathy in action. So having that piece in there would be absolutely essential, and have some people in a large group who know how to do that piece. Ideally someone other than me. Yeah. Someone else, or someone other than us.
Sprinkled into, so basically you would need as you scale up the number of people, you need to scale up sort of level of helpers that have that skill,
right,
for when these small conflicts,
right. Yeah, when you have a very small group, you need a facilitator, a scribe, and maybe a stacker, or something like that. but as you get bigger, you need more roles. You need a timekeeper, you need a vibe watcher, and
Yeah.
you know, all those things that we saw emerge out of the Occupy general meetings.
Well, let me ask you. I do have a second question I ask people that I do enjoy what people say, and that question is, how do you? Actually, before I ask that question, this is totally like bugging me in my brain that I haven't checked something here, so I'm gonna do that real quick. You took a drink of water, so I'm gonna check.
Cool.
There it is, and I'm going to drag this over to there and take that.
Love that picture.
That goes away. Alright, so just in case somebody jumps into our meeting, they will show up behind us. Oh, they manage participants. Rosanna is in there. So someone dropped into our meeting, Rosanna. You're welcome to show your video or unmute and say hello if you want, just because it's fun. Or you can just sit in the meeting. Let me see, is there a chat window? This is a little awkward, but you know. All right. So someone did come in, and we can, as I said, we can take up to 50 people in this room, and it would really change our conversation. But as it is,
With 50 people sitting over our shoulder, that would change the conversation.
that would, yeah. So we'd have 50 people here, but we have infinite people potentially here.
That's right.
You know, and Sherry, hi guys, I'm totally curious, but I've got to go. Hey, a few people, Duro, Taylor. Hi everyone that jumped in. Okay. So eventually this is going to get really complicated when this show gets popular, which it's sure to. So I'm just going to stay focused on you now.
Right on.
We're going to continue this conversation and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the question. How do you respond to power when someone tries to use power over you? They raise their voice or do other sort of other things that are expressions of trying to use power to move you in a certain direction.
I don't know that I experience a whole lot of that besides, someone raising their voice, and I'm certainly able to still be triggered by something like that. But for the most part, I've gotten very much to where when I see someone raising their voice, that doesn't, I almost am grateful because I'd rather have someone communicating in a way that's difficult for me, if it is, than not communicating, or communicating something that's not entirely true for them. That I'm not getting the whole picture. So if they're raising their voice, then I'm grateful that that they're willing to keep expressing themselves, and I become very curious about what's driving that much energy. So I guess that, and in terms of raising your voice, I don't know if I see that as trying to use power over me. But, and then I'm trying to think of other situations where people try to use power over me, but I generally resist.
You resist?
Well, sure. I mean, I want there to be a balance. So when there's coercion, unless it's something that I'm already familiar with them and what's involved, and I'm going, okay, yeah, that's fine. But I don't think I experience it that much.
I didn't experience it a lot before I became a politician and before I lived in community. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of the stakes of the context in which you're with people. If you're in a lifeboat with people and it's like everyone's feeling pressure, enormous pressure that's really personal, I guess they tend to, emotions tend to spike more. That's at least for the community side. And in the political side, there's all sorts of crazy pressures in the political world. Do
you have any examples of what you've experienced? Would you be willing to So maybe just a generic sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people. I had a person come up to me after a political meeting, and I was sitting in a chair, and they came up and they were standing over me, and they were looking down, and they were raising their voice, and they were saying what I was doing in the meeting was inappropriate, and it was very, it was very like, it was such a, and that was like, that really sticks out for me because it was really early in my political career, and it was a very new experience for me. It's like, wow, this is how apparently this person treats people, gets people to do what they want, I guess. And but in that, that was like, I guess that's why I asked that question, because I did not, what I learned and started to learn there is that I really soften when someone raises their intensity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, a part of me is just like, a big part of me is just looking at them saying, are you serious? You're really gonna like raise your voice at me? It's like, it's so absurd. And
as in unnecessary, or not, lack of respect, or what when you say absurd, I just wonder what the
it just like, it seems to me well, I guess it really just seems sort of juvenile to me. It's just not how, a mature adult human being speaks to another mature adult human being. Mm-hmm. It's very much, it's like sports. It's like you're bringing something I would experience in a sporting event, like a basketball game where someone's like, when I play sports, I might be like, but in talking to someone, right, I'm not going to bring that aggressiveness and that strength to try to get someone to do something.
Right. Do you think that's what he or she was trying to do? Get you to do something.
Yeah.
Get you to do something, to do differently in the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, clearly it was, and
was he telling you what to do? He or she telling you what to do, or just saying that was inappropriate and that kind of.
Yeah, inappropriate, and trying to get me not to do it ever again.
That's really interesting. I guess I hadn't necessarily equated the raising of the voice and the saying this is inappropriate, don't do it next time, and all that as being an attempt at power over.
No.
My question was, did you remain seated?
Mm-hmm.
You did. So I think when that kind of thing has happened to me, I will stand up. Like I don't like uneven. And I'm taller than most people.
Yeah.
And if I'm just standing next to someone who's not as tall as I am, I'm uncomfortable at the almost like you said, the power differential or the height differential. So I will do things just to figure out how to be more on their level. And if it's the other way around, I don't like it either. So if I was sitting there and someone started, I think I would pretty quickly want to stand up and be. Not to try to, like, whoa, look at me, but just more to level out.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is eye contact. If someone is confronting you, if you're willing to just look them in the eye, right. I mean, you're definitely saying, I'm here, yeah, I'm listening to you,
I'm looking at you,
I'm not afraid of you. If a part of you is trying to trigger fear in me, I mean, actually, it was triggering emotions. I mean,
anxiety.
I just call it I just call it emotion. It's just like, it builds up, and it's like,
is it defensive? Is it? Are you in?
It's like an anxiety, fear type emotion that comes up when intense moments like that.
Yeah.
And if it's on the political stage, I mean, sometimes it's in a meeting. I mean, there have been moments in meetings, just like you described, where another commissioner is really coming after me, like over something. Like there's been a lot of controversy over the recording of these meetings, because I believe they should be recorded, and I make sure they are recorded. And so at the end of one of these meetings, which was kind of a it was kind of a long meeting, it was kind of boring, and so I was like sitting back in my chair and just sort of like listening around. But at the end of the meeting, this other commissioner had been saving up something, and he's like, I need to say something, and had to like say something across the table to me. And in that case, I did like, oh, we're gonna have something. I'm gonna sit up and look at you and have my back straight. And the attack went on and on. Then I was like, yeah, I got nothing to say to that. I don't really. I was like, it's fine. But it was like, if you're going to confront me in public, I will. And maybe that was the difference between that and the one-on-one situation. If it's one-on-one, there's no audience reading the body language.
That's what I was going to ask you, is how much of the anxiety, fear came from the fact that that you're in public, that there's other people viewing what's happening. Is there a
definitely
sense of
contributes? Definitely does.
So then, is it a concern or a curiosity about what other people are thinking of this, or how they're seeing you in this light? Is it something like that, like the being seen part versus the one-on-one part?
It's like all those considerations, they sort of blend into one massive emotional, huge energy thing in those moments.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, as a politician, I'm sitting there. I constantly have to go back to, especially when the emotions go big, go back to why the heck am I here? Why am I in this room at all? And why am I participating in this generally unpleasant experience? And so I go back to that. And like, I have another example, if we can jump to another example. I was pushing the board to do what's called a community health assessment, something I think hospital districts should do every 3 years, and in some states are required to do every 3 years at least. And then and we hadn't really done one for like 10 years. And so I was pushing this, and I was saying, pointing out, I mean, we care about our community's health. We should be monitoring our community's health in detailed ways, in rigorous ways. And, a commissioner took real offense at me saying this because it sounded, he took it personally. He was like, are you saying we don't care about our community? And he was really offended. And he was like, just really sort of, I can't remember his exact words, but it's on audio. We could always find it.
But it was at you.
Yeah, he was like really upset. He's like, I'm really offended that you keep on talking like you're the only one here that cares about our community. And he sort of went on a little rant like that. And it was a direct, and so I really had to sort of like, it wasn't really like an attack insult, but it was like, but it was directed at me. It was a very emotional critique of my behavior in that moment and how I was presenting myself. And so in that moment, I softened, and I thought, how do I respond to that? And I had to really sort of go back to, why am I here? And I remembered, sort of the thing, the speak from the heart, thing that is sort of, I think for me, I guess that's my solution to conflict, is speak from the heart. And so I was like, I said to him, and this was actually this was Chuck Russell, who's not on the board anymore, great guy. But I said, Chuck, I'm here because I care about our community. I am just trying to figure out the best way that we can care for our community. That is all I'm doing. I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm not trying to criticize what you're doing, but I am going to keep asking questions and suggest things. And I'm sorry if I'm going to turn over rocks that you feel you've already looked under, but I feel like that's the only way I can do this job. And it was, and after the meeting,
how did he respond to that?
It was good. It softened the moment. And after the meeting, I think we even hugged or shook hands or something after the meeting. Yeah. So that's another. And it sounds like that's kind of similar. The sort of the empathy thing. How do you sort of relate your what a tactic you would recommend? Is it similar to the speak from the heart, the the using empathy in the moment?
Well, yes and no. I mean, speak from the heart is too vague for me to really know what that, to really do anything with that. So there's two pieces to this. One is recognizing that his criticisms of you, depending on, I'd have to hear some of the phrases, but if he's saying you're this or you're that or that's absurd, why would you even, those are sort of like, I see those as red flags for empathy. So it's like if someone is, so they're abstractions. These something being absurd or somebody being an idiot or somebody being selfish, or I mean those are just abstract concepts that we overlay on people and behaviors and whatever we like or don't like. So what number one is to me you can just it's like you don't tune out what he's saying, but you tune out what it means in terms of is this really criticism? No, it's the only way he knows how. And most people are in this boat. Most people only know how to express what's important to them by criticizing what they don't like. So my question to him, when he says, don't think you're the only one that gives a damn about the community, what I would wonder is, or let me ask you this, what do you think he is wanting if he's asking you that? If he's saying you're not the only one, so what do you think he needs if he's asking that, or if he's saying that to you? Do you have a sense of it? My guess to him would be like, are you wanting some acknowledgement that everyone here is here because they care about the community? And his answer might have been, well, yes. I mean, what do you think? Why do you think I'm on this board? Of course I care, So now he's agreeing with you. He's saying yes, yes, and he's being heard in a way that he himself didn't even know how to articulate that. He didn't know how to say, Matt, I'd really appreciate some acknowledgement of all the other stuff that we do here as board commissioners, Instead, he's saying, you're not the, So if you take that at face value, you're going to get anxiety and fear or whatever, and you're going to figure out how to defend yourself or explain yourself. Yeah. Whereas if you realize that it can't actually be about me, he's trying to tell me his experience of, it's so frustrating to hear you make these suggestions, Matt. I feel frustration because I want acknowledgement and recognition of all the stuff that we are doing to try to help the community. So that's what I would hear. That probably there's something like that behind what he's saying. So I could dismiss the criticism, be curious about what needs he's trying to express, and then asking. And even if I don't ask, just the curiosity is de-escalating. For me, is calming. But then if I ask him, it starts to become de-escalating for him. Right. And I mean, I've literally countless times I've watched people who are all pumped up over something, and then me or somebody else asks them a couple of questions, and it's literally the energy goes from, but yeah, and all of a sudden it goes to this, yes, thank you, yes. That fast, almost that fast. Just by asking those kinds of, being curious about what's driving this person's discomfort. So
I think it depends. I mean, it would work. I think it would work extremely differently depending on the type of confrontation moment we're talking about. Because that was a moment with a person who wasn't trying to use power over me. Was really actually expressing strong emotion of how he was feeling in that moment. The other examples, really were sort of blatant. I want things to go the way I want them to go, and I'm angry that you're getting in my way. You're creating an obstacle, and I am going to raise my voice to try to get you to just understand I know more than you and just do it my way. And that's a different type of situation.
It is, and if I've watched. One of my favorite memories was working the prison, and there was a very bulked up guy who was very angry about what was happening between him and the administration, and not being able to get personal items or something, whatever. And he was on the edge of his seat, leaning towards me. I mean, he was just like, "You have no idea," and he was just so, But
this was a member of administration in the prison.
No. This was a prison.
This was a prison.
Yeah, this was a guy. Yeah, it's the medium maximum security prison out near CQ. And so I was working with him with a group, but then it came to his, he had something he wanted to talk about, and so the more he talked, explaining the situation, the more pumped up and angry he got, and I was literally like kind of looking down the hall, like how far away is that guard?
Yeah, you didn't have a guard in the room.
No, and so. But I just kept asking him questions. I was literally like thinking, wow, this might be the difference between, I really want to de-escalate this energy, because it was like, wow. And I just kept asking him questions, and he eventually, pretty quickly fell back in his chair, with relief, because he was like, yes, exactly, that would be really nice. Yes. So that kind of energy, I've watched it just scale right down if you don't try to come against it or explain or defend or fight back or whatever it is. Just curiosity about, is it this? Are you upset because you want respect? Are you needing understanding? Or there's something you're needing. And if I ask you, it's going to engage you trying to figure out, well, what the hell is it that I need? What is it? When you talk about this huge ball, it all comes together, it's big emotion. If you watch that over time, and I know you practice mindfulness, so it's just really tracking that and being careful to say, okay, well, there's this element, this component of this emotion that's maybe I'm a little nervous because I appreciate calm, and I'm getting a little irritated because I like respect, and I'm a little fearful because I want to be seen accurately as standing up for what's important to me, and there's a bunch of other people in the room, and I'm, you see what I'm saying? So you tie sort of different threads of your emotions to different needs that are driving that whole big thing.
In the moment when it happens, and I don't know if I'm unusual about this, I'm a very emotional person, it's just like all the needles go to max. I mean, I'm just like at max at everything, and I'm like, I do try to breathe. It was interesting. We had another confrontation. This was in Chelan, where we had a meeting and they weren't expecting me to record the meeting, and they weren't planning on recording the meeting, and I took out a recorder once the meeting started, and everyone got incredibly upset with me and started to tell me to turn it off, and in very, very bossy sort of ways, like, no, you're not recording this meeting, and then giving their arguments why, and after they all sort of like had their first sort of salvo of, no, you're not going to do this, turn that off, I mean, off the charts emotions inside, although I don't really show it on the outside, I just breathe, and you can actually listen to this audio of this, and I don't say anything for, I mean, it had to be at least 30 seconds to a minute of just silence, and I'm sitting there like, wow, I wonder how long I could go with just like having this moment of silence.
And they're all waiting for you to respond.
And they couldn't, they couldn't wait. After about a minute, the president of the board was like, Matt or Commissioner Reddy, do you, what, are you going to turn it off? But for me, that was the most bold I've ever been with just like, I need to take care of my emotions at this moment, and I need to wait, and so I'm just going to wait. And I know it's everyone in the room is feeling this is strange, because that's not what you do. You're not allowed to be silent in a board meeting for unless you're having like a moment of silence. You don't do moments of silence. I mean,
you're on your own.
Yeah, but I was actually very proud of myself just for that personal practice.
Being aware enough to take care of yourself and being willing to do that in a space that's not.
I mean, it really took bravery for me to be silent that long. So that was like a personal accomplishment, just stretching the silence, because it did help me. I mean, my emotions, they stayed like off the scales, and once I started speaking, they went, they responded and it went off the charts again. But it's kind of like, I look at it like skiing, skiing down a hill. If you can stop on any sort of slope, then you can just stop and go a little further and stop. And that's how I see sort of mindfulness for myself. When my emotions go out of control, it's like I proved to myself in that moment I can stop.
Gotcha.
at any point in this like
Gotcha.
emotion. And so it's like, all right, here I'm going to speak. I'm going to get into the whirlwind of what's going on in this room again, trying not to feed it, trying to
Right.
speak, trying to de-escalate it, but at the same time de-escalating myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about a lot of the things that are a lot of these things are why I said earlier that it's, to me, one of the most cutting edge parts of this whole thing is when you are in a meeting, because you're being there silent. A minute gone is a minute lost in a meeting.
Yeah.
Now, unless you're willing to go over, which, you know, over time, at the scheduled ending of the meeting, which I really don't like doing if at all possible. I really try to keep things contained and keep the agreements we made about the meeting. But that's why it's so cutting edge, is because you can't really dismiss a Matt Reddy who is got to sit for a minute because he can't really function right now, you know, but the meeting's got to go on also. So how do you balance those things? How do you provide empathy for people in real time in a meeting situation that's on the clock, that involves a bunch of other people, you know, that have made an agreement about how this is going to happen, and now something not on the agenda is happening and is peeling away time. So
Yeah.
I just find that to be really challenging.
Yeah.
How's our time doing?
Yeah, so it's 5 minutes, but why don't we check in on the comments? There have been a couple comments on Facebook,
Cool,
and we'll just
cool.
see what.
I'm so glad you're monitoring all the technology.
All right, there's been one
I'm
comment.
impressed.
Sandy Herschelman, powerful. Alex, addressing your personal examples of conflict and offering some tips to smooth the conversations. So I guess that's not really a question, just sort of a comment that she found your. And okay, so that's the comment we have, and I don't know if there's comments on. I seriously doubt there's any comments on YouTube. And Rosanna is still in our meeting. I don't know how well she's hearing things, but she's still there. So let's see. So we got 5 minutes to go. Is there anything else we want to like tap into before we conclude this? And we've just sort of delved into some really interesting, juicy topics, and I feel it was kind of like almost like a great public, personal, political therapy session for me.
Nice.
It'd be good to debrief like every meeting, you know, with you. Like
Sure,
this.
totally.
But,
Yeah, no, it's interesting. This is after Occupy and after I left Port Townsend 4 years ago. I went to Florida and thought I was going to hang out with a friend and write a book, and I've been working on the book, but I didn't realize I still had work to do to figure out what to focus on. And in the end, what I decided, because my focus originally or ultimately became, how can I blend the empathy work and the consent decision making work into one model, so that one person can buy one book and read one theory that's written in all one language and one glossary, consistently lays out everything from self-care to empathy to group dynamics, decision making, the whole 9 yards. How, you know, and it's fascinating. I would like to do that one day, but I realized in that time that the core piece of empathy, which I was sort of doing with you, like dismissing the criticisms and the evaluations and aiming at what needs are driving this, and that simple shift is incredibly transformational. And people don't have to know much about it; they don't have to see it or do it very much to see, whoa. And I just decided I want to start off by focusing on getting that piece to as many people as possible, rather than the whole entire piece to the few clients I might find who want to take the whole thing from beginning to end, starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So that's so it's fun for me to go into this because I don't pay that as much attention to the group dynamics and consent decision making as I used to.
Yeah.
But it was a nice mix too. Like
Yeah.
I said, the sort of the cutting edge, the intersection of the two.
Well, I mean, I really feel like the world, the way power works in our world is extremely broken and corrupt. And the solution to that is going to involve a lot of people with the type of expertise and skills and passion that you have. I mean, I kind of felt this way like during the Occupy movement. Facilitators, people that have facilitation skills, but not just facilitation skills. It's the other piece of that. It's sort of like the vibes checker skills, like the group empathy and the skills for how to help a group when conflict arises. I mean, I feel like people like you are incredibly valuable to human society right now. When we don't know, I don't think society knows how to use these skills yet. We don't really have, when you have a hierarchy, you don't really need people all that much that help make people happier in the process.
Right.
You just need people to follow orders.
Right.
But when you have, when you really have a more egalitarian society, when everyone's needs and emotions are important, not just the needs and emotions of the people at top, you need some serious healing power, some mindful Zen power intermixed, teaching people, this is really teaching everyone, this is the skill you use, and this is how you train it, and this is how you these are tools you can learn and practice.
Totally.
So thank you for the work you do. Thank you for everything that you taught me when we worked together, and I continue to learn from you from these conversations.
You're welcome, Matt. You're really welcome, and thank you for what you're doing, because I'm really appreciating now what you're pulling together and what you're working on, these different levels and different channels for putting it out there, and the Hive One. It's exciting. I had an idea for the same type of idea a few years ago, and you're doing it. So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and I hope thank you, and I hope you'll come back and join us.
I'd love to.
And if we do get some big events going on Hive One, I would be very interested in having you helping me figure out how to facilitate.
Yeah, I'd love to work with it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, that is the conclusion of the 5th episode of The Mindful Activist. Thank you, anyone that watches or dropped in and watched. And we'll see you next time. So, thanks.